With the girls fully strapped in, everybody else rushes to do their assignments. Automated systems immediately activate. Protecting the food takes precedence over a lot of things. The procurement decks go through a type of transformation. There's no need to secure the fresh green grass that's sitting there, that's usually used to grazing areas for the animals, as the grass itself will anchor itself. The wheat, barley, hops, and so on will be set in low G so that if there is some sort of movement, it won't simply shift and end up on the walls, which is going to be a very big cleanup. The vegetables and fruits are also covered as well. However, it's noted that if they do have to do any hygiene maneuvers, many of these plants are going to end up sideways and potentially be lost. Then there's the hydroponic area, where the upper deck actually lowers down and actually seals the hydroponics. Until everything is over, now they're completely encapsulated. Even if they spill, the mess will be minimal. The garden areas are all set to 1.3 Gs to hold vegetables in place at that point in the hydroponics, and also to make sure that the fluid doesn't go flying everywhere. The fruit trees that are there remain in 4-point restraints to aid with the root system, holding them down into the soil that's there. Soil that is several meters thick. However, if one was to push sideways or twist at several Gs, this root system's not going to hold for nothing. All equipment that's used for this deck is automatically moved into holding areas and secured, stored as though it's simply charging, latching itself and locking itself into place. The animals, well, they already know what to do. They've heard this sound before. Ever since they were young, they've known what this sound was. The chickens hear it and they run straight into their houses, jump onto the roosts and hold on very, very tight. If there's no room in the roost, they simply go into the nesting boxes and try to wiggle themselves down into the hay as much as they can so that they don't get thrown around too much. The sheep and goats rush to their houses and immediately get in, and once everyone's in, the doors on said houses automatically raise their ramps, close, lock, securing themselves. So if any of them are thrown around, they won't be thrown around all too far. The pigs, however, that's a different story. They may or may not hurry to their house. Some of them simply look around like, what is that noise? I think I'll just keep rooting over here. Most of them scream as they freak out that they run to the house. However, the others, again, if not fully trained, because how do you train a pig, simply look at them like they're nuts. Ava is in charge of making sure all animals and equipment on these decks are secure, and she runs from bow to stern and back again, double checking to make sure everything is where it needs to be and all the animals are where they need to be. And as she runs, she makes sure the cattle prod is charged, ready if necessary. However, as she goes through all the vegetables, all the fruit, she realizes it's all good. She realized that the chickens are in. She realized all the goats and everything are in. And the pigs just need one little jolt to get them up and moving. And once they're in the house, once again, it is secured. Robert rushes to the cargo bay to assure everything is secured, locked down so it will not shift during any type of maneuvers. Dropping everything to 0 G inside the cargo area allows him to see any unsecured, as even the slightest vibration of the ship will make these crates move. That way he can find them very, very easily, and he can easily run up and secure them down, locking them into place so he doesn't have to deal with a giant mess later. Once both of them are complete, they will rush to the bridge in the absolute heart of the ship. Inside the citadel, with Bichon right next to him, sometimes looking over his shoulder, sometimes moving next to him, the captain watches to see the board go from red to green, signifying that everything is secured and ready to go. Checks are being run over and over to make sure everything is good. Bichon looks kind of sideways, and she sees one of the boards. She doesn't understand what it is and says, "What is this one?" The captain turns, looks, and says, "That's Betty and Veronica. They've gone into standby mode with the rest of the bots, making sure they're charged all the way up, as they might need a little extra charge to deal with any damage." Bichon's eyes get wide. "Damage?" Captain immediately gets on the speaker and says, Gulon and Slygon, if you prefer to not sit there and just be scared, you might prefer putting a VR game on to deal with all this crap. The controls are under your left hand. Also, a reminder, the only other part of this ship with more shielding than your quarters at this point is the engine room. So you can stop shivering and please don't pee your pants. This seemed to put them both at ease just a little bit. Slygon, of course being older, activated the game first as she wanted some sort of distraction. Back on the bridge, Bichon said, Can you identify who or what is attempting to intercept us? The captain turned to the side and said, Yep, as he pointed to the screen. It looks like, yep, these are Croatoan pirates. You can see they always come at us in groups. Bichon then asks, Are you sure they're attempting intercept? Absolutely, the captain says. We shouldn't see any other ship out here for at least another week. I mean, at least. The flight patterns out here are very, very carefully planned to avoid even the slightest chance of collision. Even a near miss with these bubbles could be very, very bad, and that's putting it lightly. Besides, there's no planets or systems in the directions they're coming from except, well, yours, actually. Meaning that this is where they accepted their contract. Bichon starts shivering and looks for a second and counts up 13 ships heading towards them. The Croatoans are a very small species, standing fully developed somewhere between 2 and 3 feet tall, meaning their ships are small as well, but this one vessel is still outnumbered 13-1. As Bichon looks more at the silhouette of the approaching ships, it's clear that these are not peaceful. Not at all. These are fighter craft. There's clear evidence of heavy weapons built directly into the keel of the ship. The ships have 48% of their mass dedicated to engines, which means they're trying to intercept, they're trying to move faster than anything else because they need to catch up. They're designed specifically to chase down and intercept, maneuver in a fight, once they get close, of course. She checks again, this time for weaponry, and she can see that 31% of the mass is directly for weaponry. This, once again, puts a chill down her spine, as the only time you see numbers this high is in military craft. Then she realized only 21% is designed for anything else. This includes quarters, life support, anything, which means that the inside of the ship itself is very lean, very Spartan, as the humans would say. She knows that if they get a hold of her and drag her into one of these ships, she would never be fed, as food is extremely limited in this type of situation. She'd be hardly given water, as water reclamation systems are going to be already worked near capacity. She might get enough to stay alive, but that's about it. And since they can't allow her to move, she and her daughters will be chained to a storage wall with very little room to move at all. If they can't move, then their bones will begin to ache, their joints will strain, their muscles will begin to atrophy and just be in such agony, but they can't move to stretch or nothing. This would be a living death, to the point that one would welcome the poor treatment that they would get wherever the end of their travels would be. This would be the reason why the Croatoans are contracted. It is well noted that anything that they capture would be begging for any sort of the slightest kindness, and the first one that receives it usually becomes the contracted one. Bichon freezes, looking over the captain's shoulder as she thinks about what may happen to her and her daughters if they're caught, and she is absolutely petrified except for the slightest of movement in her tail. Sensing the unease, the captain simply looks at her, then looks back and says, "Worrying's not going to help. Sit down. Try to relax. Take a breath. Take several of them. Deep breaths. And don't mess up my chair when you sit down, okay? I don't care how nervous you are. I don't want to clean that up." Hesitantly, she sits, shaking, as she sees the captain go through his checks over and over again with practiced precision. It's as though he has gone from some sort of biological being to a robot. A few minutes later, Robert and Ava arrive. Well, each one, when they show up, they begin to give up their ready reports and give green status, all secured, and then immediately take up their positions. And then they wait. They wait as they go through their checks, constantly scanning the screens for even the slightest thing that might be wrong, something that might need to be checked, might need to be fixed. At approximately 5 minutes from intercept, a strange voice, comes across.
"Human vessel, you are transporting 3 known criminals. You will power down your vessel and prepare to surrender. You will surrender said criminals immediately. Failure to do so will result in forceful removal from your vessel and immediate confiscation of your vessel. Power down and prepare to be boarded."
Hearing this, both Ava and Robert try to stifle their own voices, realizing that high-pitched voice is what a Croatoan sounds like. The captain, without even skipping a beat, presses a button and says, "Croatoan pirates, this is the human vessel Midnight Pearl. If you have any evidence of such crimes, you are required by all galactic law to submit them for review before we will remove ourselves from FTL, before we will power down everything. We will await your transmission." It is a fairly long wait as the Croatoans slowly get closer and closer, seeming to slow down their own FTL engines so that they don't get too close too fast because they don't want to overshoot. They want to be right next to it. Finally, they get a response.
"Human vessel, you are transporting 3 known criminals. Their crimes are not a concern of yours. You will power down your vessel and prepare to surrender said criminals. Failure to do so will result in forceful removal of them from your vessel and immediate confiscation of your vessel."
The captain turns towards Bichon, who is almost turning a bright, almost halo-type blue, as she is completely scared out of her mind. Yet he looks at her calm, gives her kind of an up-down, seeing her entire body from toes to forehead in this strange bright color. He says, "You shouldn't worry. This is recorded and they know it. Refusal to show any evidence or warrant for your arrest shows that they are not even bounty hunters." That's when Bichon turns and says, "What are they?" Not seeming to pay attention, the captain turns back to the sensor readings. Then he activates communications again and says, "Croatoan pirates, be advised. You have sent no evidence, nor have you shown a warrant for arrest. As such, your claim is invalid. Also, we can see you attempting to merge your FTL distortion bubble with our own. You are now under official warning. Space maritime law allows me to protect my ship, my crew, and my cargo by any means I see fit. It is your best interest to withdraw, return the deposit given to you, and you will still be breathing farts tomorrow." That last part was a subtle jab at the fact that the methane-rich atmosphere of the Croatoan Homo species smells absolutely rancid. The response came immediately.
"You will be the one desiring you altered your decision, human. It will not take much to disable your ship and force you to surrender. I will personally defile your crew, as our contract states. You will perish screaming in agony.
The captain smiles a predatory smile. This time when he talks, it's not into the communications, but it's just loud enough that the crew can hear. I love hitmen. Whatever you do to him, you don't feel bad. Then suddenly his tone changed to being completely professional. Activate defensive and offensive turrets now. Bichon looks at the humans, and they all seem to have a predatory grin and a predatory look in their eyes. A bit of glee as they activate the ship. She watches the readouts as what she could count at least 24 point defense cannons activate. A 3D image of them rising from the hidden compartments just amazes her. As she had seen this 3D image before, it didn't look like this ship was armed at all. She suddenly started reading energy levels and ammo counts on these weapons. It's though they were a mixture of different ones. But that wasn't the freaky part. Massive turrets began to come out of compartments, as well as the point defense cannons. Different sizes started to come out all over the ship. She saw the largest ones, quad-barreled cannons, each one's barrel larger than the Croatan ships themselves. She didn't understand the designs, but each one was ready. She started to look at the power levels of each of these cannons, and each of them could easily fuel a small ship. Each cannon was also mounted on a strange gimbal system, a way that they could maneuver and allowing the firing arc in almost every single direction. Seeing the distortion bubbles about to touch, the captain got on to the comms once again and said, "This is your last warning. Fuck off." The voice responded,
"Fuck you, asshole."
just as the distortion bubbles began to touch, creating the smallest of portal between the two bubbles as though they are soap bubbles merging together slowly. The captain simply says, "No, fuck you, asshole." That is when the Midnight Pearl showed its teeth as it began to fire its weapons towards that opening. The Midnight Pearl did not change in any direction. It didn't rotate, it didn't swing, it didn't do anything. It just turned its weapons towards that hole, whichever ones could actually fire at it, and it began to launch all sorts of danger and destruction towards it. Pulses of energy flew at near light speed towards the opening portal as it opened up slowly like some sort of sphincter. Yet only half of these cannons were pulse weapons. The other half were beam weapons, and they all fired into this opening sphincter. They blasted an entire combat load across the face of the Croatan ship, several shots penetrating so deep that the beams ended up cutting clean through the aft. With the engine destroyed from the ship, the distortion bubble from the enemy ship simply collapsed. Without the Croatan engines allowing for the distortion bubble around their ship, the standard bubble around the Midnight Pearl simply closed that opening almost instantly as it maintained its own FTL bubble. The Croatan ship was now without any type of protection, and now all sorts of debris would simply come crashing into it. This allowed microscopic debris all the way up to debris the size of its own ship to crash in easily 50 times the speed of light, tearing the ship to pieces. So if anyone was on board, not only would the sudden shift be absolutely painful, but they wouldn't survive more than a few seconds. As that first ship was torn to pieces, it seemed as though this first volley was a dare, a double dare, a triple dog dare to the Croatans, and all of their pirate vessels seemed to throttle up and head towards this human ship. As though constructing an orchestra, the cannons primary cannons, secondary, tertiary, and even the point defense cannons swing this way and that, spitting out death into the face of any pirate that tries to attack. Only one is able to fire a single shot before being totally obliterated as the dance of death in space concludes. The energy bolt that was fired from the Croatoan's main gun came flying towards the Midnight Pearl, and for a moment, Bichon just about shit herself. Yet the human's secondary energy pulse weapons fired directly at it, and when the ball of light from the Croatoan ship struck the one from the human ship, there was a reaction. And for a moment, there was a tiny, minuscule supernova in space. And with the last of the pirate ships destroyed, the captain simply turns and says, "Scan for additional signatures." Robert replies, "None, sir." Aya comes in, "Confirm, no additional signatures on any sensors, sir." The captain, finally seeming to relax, said, "Excellent. Good work, everybody. Set out for damage control. I want a full assessment." And with that, all androids and robots became active and began to check the ship, every tiny little bit. The captain then said, "All right, set condition green." And as everything went back to their standby mode, the restraints instantly released from everybody. It didn't matter if it was those on the bridge or those currently playing a VR game hoping that this game isn't the last thing they ever play. Inside the food procurement deck, it resets. The upper deck pulls away from the hydroponics. The animals are released from their houses, yet many of them are hesitant to walk away. And everyone, every biologic, every single android on the ship seems to take a collective With that, the captain spins around, looking right at Bichon and says, "Oh, that's enough excitement for one morning." Bichon was shocked, absolutely shocked at what she saw. The humans went from peace to war setting and back to peace like it was nothing. She didn't understand the psychology of it. She remembers the hands of the humans dancing across the controls, even though they didn't need to use their hands. Each of the humans plugged themselves into the chairs and they all became one with the ship. It was a calculated destruction. The ship she was on didn't get struck. It didn't slow down. It didn't move. And now, after slaughtering 13 other vessels with unknown numbers on board, the humans are just talking about lunch? During lunch, Bichon told her daughters what had happened, and they held on every single word. After lunch, they went to the large entertainment room, and they watched the recordings. As they witnessed all this, Bichon was talking them through it, and all the goers are simply shocked at the firepower of a single human transport ship. Why? Why is this? They kept thinking. Slagon even asked, if this is the power of a human cargo vessel, how devastating are their warships? The thought of that sent a shiver down all their spines, yet the fact that they're being protected by these human vessels, the shiver was a good shiver. When they asked about this, the captain said, out here in the void, you need to be ready for anything. Reason being, anything is possible. You should know there's a million ways to die out here, and they all suck. And, well, let's face it. On the top of that, humans refuse to die for lack of shooting back. This put the goers in almost a catatonic state as they tried to understand this. They had never had to deal with anything like this before because, well, they were rich and their daddies and their husbands took care of things. But now everything is raw and in their face. During lunch, all three goers were almost completely silent as they continued to contemplate everything. Yet Robert and Ava were far from silent, or still for that matter. The captain had to remind them to finish their checks before anything else. Robert simply turns and says, "We finished up right before lunch. I can show you the reports if you want." The captain looks over at Betty, who is right next to him, as though a confirmation, and she simply nods. And Ava already had her hand on Veronica's leg, rubbing it up and down, as seemingly not allowing Veronica to finish her work, but it seemed like she didn't seem to mind. The captain noticed all this, but played it off, saying, "All right, I still have my checks, so after lunch, you're all off duty. And by the looks of things, I will be taking care of supper because I don't think you're going to want to be here. So, you know what? I'm just going to make this simple. You're all off duty till tomorrow. I'll handle it." Hearing that, they immediately shove the last of the food down their throats and hurry out the door, Ava dragging Veronica by the arm, almost taking her off her android feet, and Robert actually standing up, picking up Betty, and carrying her right out into the hallway. Seeing this, the goers watch and then turn over towards the captain, who notices their look, and he looks away, shakes his head, and goes, "Teenagers. By the way, ladies, that food isn't going to eat itself. Also, you not eating because of whatever mental gymnastics you're going through is not going to do anything except damage your body. So go ahead and eat." He gets up and starts cleaning his own plate off the table as the three eat slowly. Then he continues by saying, "You better get used to it. This is just the way things are out here. I know you don't get it because all three of you have lived in luxury your entire lives, protected, privileged, and, well, this is like touching on a fresh nerve. So yeah, you'll get used to it in time. And that's something we got plenty of right now." Eventually, they finish up with their eating, clear the table, and in a surprise move, after putting their dishes in the washer, both of the young girls reach over towards the captain from both sides and squeeze onto him with a tight hug, and they simply say, "Thank you. Thank you for protecting us." Their warm, soft skin pushing through the very light fabric that they are wearing, and the fact that the captain is only wearing one layer himself, he has to hold himself professional, though he realizes these are still young girls. The captain leans over to give them just a little bit of a hug, but as he does, he quickly finds that their mother is wrapping her arms right around his head, and tight. The tight embrace pushes her blue chest right into his face as he's leaned over. Trying to stay professional, he stands up, but she's still holding on, taking her feet right off of the deck. In a muffled voice, he says, "You're welcome, all of you." He pauses, thinking that she's going to let go, but she doesn't. And he's starting to wonder if he has to walk around with this woman actually strapped to his face. "Ma'am, remember what I said about distracting? If you could please release me. I mean, not that this is unpleasant. I'm just finding it a bit distracting." She doesn't let go for a second, so he puts his hands right on her waist and pushes ever so slightly until she lets go, and he's holding her straight out, and then slowly puts her feet back down on the deck plating. Trying to stay professional. "If you all will excuse me, I really need to go to the gym." Taking a second to compose himself, he turns around to leave, and before he gets to the door, he pauses, turns his head slightly, and says, "You know, you're all welcome to join me if you want. That is, if you think you can handle it. And don't worry, we'll start you off slow, because this journey just got started. We got a long way to go." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 3 of this ongoing series. And before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Dona8362. And I also need to send out some humongous Thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and they are Prozac Pancakes, Clinton Arundel, Guardian Sage, Steve Ilwig, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Brian Kemp, and SS Demon. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntext.
Ejecting!